President Donald Trump is back on the campaign trail after recovering from COVID-19. He's pushing for more in-person rallies and events in the final weeks until the election. Here to discuss President Trump's re-election strategy heading into November is Hogan Gidley, National Press Secretary for Trump 2020. Hogan, great to have you with us on the show today. Now, the president, we know, will be having a town hall with voters on Thursday. What does the president hope to accomplish there that he wouldn't have been able to do at a virtual debate with Joe Biden?
Well, it's always about talking directly to the American people. This president delivers a message that is patriotic, that is unifying, that is uplifting, and it resonates around the country, regardless of where you live in the continental United States. It's proof positive that what this president has been able to accomplish in such a short amount of time has improved the lives of all Americans, regardless of race, religion, color, or creed. And of course, that town hall is going to be a perfect venue from which he can articulate that vision for the future and talk about some of the accomplishments in the past.
Yeah, on that vision for the future, Hogan, we know President Trump is down in national polls. He's either behind or tied with Joe Biden in some key swing states. What is President Trump's pitch to undecided voters, especially those that are out of work right now?
Well, the president rebuilt this economy once. He's doing it again. We're in a V-shaped trajectory, as he likes to say. The economy's on its way up. We saw record-setting job increases added to the American workforce for the first time in history. 4 months of consecutive growth that no one ever saw, no one ever thought possible, for that matter. And so the president has a track record of actually doing things for this economy that have never been seen before. I mean, we had record high employment for African American, Asian American, Hispanic Americans, women employed in massive numbers. There were more jobs than there were people to fill them. And because he restructured the tax code in this country, allowing average Americans, 80% of whom actually received more money back as opposed to giving so much more to the federal government, he also allowed businesses to thrive and relocate in this country. In 8 years of Joe Biden at the helm of the economy, we saw 200,000 manufacturing jobs gone. They said they'd never come back. We've seen over 500,000 return because of President Trump's policies. And you don't have to look back far. When Joe Biden was in control, when Joe Biden pushed pieces of legislation, when he voted for things like NAFTA, we saw 850,000 American jobs disappear. His placation to China cost us 3.5 million jobs in this country, leaving hardworking Americans and going to that communist nation. 60,000 manufacturing plants shuttered and closed down. This president has a different philosophy, and this president's policies have actually worked. So there are more people out there working than ever before. They can save more, they're making more, they can spend more, and that's what makes the economy thrive. The president knows this. Now, I guarantee you in that town hall, he's going to get questions from folks about the economy, but I can also guarantee you the deck won't be stacked in his favor. We saw Joe Biden, go on several networks where the folks touted undecided voters, and all you had to do was a simple Google search to find out all those people were either Democrats or had voted for his opponents in the past. So it's pretty obvious the president doesn't have any problem without a teleprompter, without notes from his staff, without earpieces. He can do these things on the fly because he knows the policy and he understands how to make it resonate with the average American.
Well, Hogan, on the economy, if you look at the unemployment numbers for September, for white Americans, the unemployment number was at about 7%. For Black Americans, it was over 12%. For Latino Americans, it was over 10%. What specifically would President Trump do in a second term to make sure that unemployment number, that gap is narrowed for white Americans versus Black and brown Americans?
Well, a couple of things. First off, let's be pretty clear that this country, was hit very hard by coronavirus. I mean, it killed more than 200,000 Americans. We're still in the throes of it now. It's a global pandemic. It's affected this world like no one thought possible. And so many people were predicting 2.5 million deaths right here in America, and one death is too many. It's completely unacceptable what China did to this country. It's unacceptable that the World Health Organization covered for China's malfeasance. The president has demanded China pay for that, and he's pulled money away from the WHO because if they're going to lie to the world and allow this thing to spread, it's going to be very problematic. But in addition to all of the death that China has caused in this world, it's also hurt people's livelihoods. People have been out of work because this country had to shut down at a time when we were seeing economic you know, historic things going on for all Americans. And so the president understands that the base is really good because we have cut taxes, we have you know, deregulation to the tune of, I guess, 22 cuts for every one regulation put in place. And that sets us on a trajectory for more success. So in the second term, what he wants to do is build on that. And while we have seen a reduction in the gap between white Americans and all of the other groups you mentioned, it should be noted that, as I talked about at the beginning, you know, the high employment numbers for these groups that they've never experienced before, they can all point back and say that's because of Donald Trump's policies. And when the plague came in and absolutely crippled this country's workforce, the president has pledged 1 million jobs per month for the next 10 months, and he does that by understanding what it's like to sign the front of a paycheck. He's the first person in the White House in a long time to actually own businesses and understand how that works. Joe Biden has been in office for 47 years. And what he's trying to get the American people to believe is all of a sudden, right now, I'm going to start working on your behalf. We saw all of the depressed wages, the stagnant movement that never really materialized under Joe Biden. He has a 50-year career of failure. This president has done more for the American people in 47 months and the economy than Joe Biden has done in 47 years.
Hogan, I do want to get your take on President Trump's narrative around the coronavirus itself. He had tweeted without evidence that he is immune to coronavirus. It ended up getting flagged by Twitter. We learned just this week that the first U.S. person contracted the virus for the second time. The second infection was more severe. Do you think this kind of misinformation from President Trump around the trajectory of COVID-19 could be detrimental to Americans, to American voters who are truly trying to understand the virus itself?
Well, it's not problematic. In fact, that's what doctors, for the most part, agree on. Even Dr. Fauci made the point that the president is probably most likely immune. Now, how that actually looks and how that actually takes shape, there are always exceptions to the rule. For example, if you have chicken pox, you don't get it again. But there are cases of people who've gotten it a second time. And so now we see someone getting COVID again for the second time. But it still doesn't mean that this president isn't immune from the virus. In fact, the doctors say the same thing. The president understands a whole lot more now about the virus, not just from a medical standpoint, but also from the therapeutics, the vaccine that's forthcoming as well, because he got it. And he was afflicted with COVID. And, you know, even in quarantine, even in Walter Reed, even with coronavirus, he still did more work on behalf of the American people than did Joe Biden. So he's always focused on making sure other people are better and that they're well. And because he had to experience it personally, he gets what a lot of these people have had to go through. And so he wants everyone to be able to have treatment as soon as possible. That's why he developed Project Warp Speed. And what's so great about that is as the vaccines and the therapeutics come online, he's also developed the needles needed for administering the vaccine, also the vials needed, all the swabs needed, so that once those once the vaccine and the therapeutics come online, we have the mechanisms to give them to the American people. For the most part, government doesn't think like that. What it does instead is it focuses on the vaccine. It takes 6 years to develop it. He didn't sacrifice any efficacy, any safety here. He just got the red tape out of the way and allowed the government to work, allowed private companies to work to try and develop this in record-setting time. It's going to happen, and the American people are going to get the vaccine faster than any time in history that a vaccine was developed.
Hogan, we really appreciate your time today. Thanks for joining us. That's Hogan Gidley, National Press Secretary for Trump 2020. Thanks again.